Hello everyone, welcome back to the channel. Thanks for tuning in to this week's video, which is all about tripods. I want to do a video explaining all the use cases of how to best utilize a tripod in your photography, regardless of the genre of photography you do. But more so than that, I also want to talk about why you might consider not using a tripod. And more importantly, I want to give you some really practical examples and some useful tips to help you make the right choice when out in the field. And one of the main things that's prompted me to make this video today is because I think for beginner photographers especially, and especially given that we live in an age where a lot of people learn photography through YouTube, we see a lot of photographers using tripods in the field, and I think a lot of people then think that that is the thing that they must do, and they must get a tripod and they must use a tripod for every photo that they take, without maybe questioning why that photographer is using a tripod. So I just want to hopefully clear that up in this video, so you can at least be, I guess, a little bit more intentional about how and when you use it. Because let's face it, nowadays the camera does so much of the heavy lifting in terms of image stabilization in body and in lenses that the need to have a tripod is maybe diminishing as technology is advancing. But I make YouTube videos and I pretty much have a tripod with me all the time, so I like to try and make use of it, and in that pursuit I have found many reasons why having a tripod has benefited my photography. And they might not all be the obvious things you think about when you think about tripods. Anyway, I'm going to tell you a little bit about where we are today as well, if I can get out of this wind. So I've come to a place called Bryn Alyn, which is a hill with these amazing limestone pavements that are in an area of outstanding natural beauty here in North Wales, and it's the closest area of outstanding natural beauty to where I live. So it's a landscape that I want to get to know a little bit more, and I think there's a lot of benefits to that. The video I did last week featuring Ansel Adams' work, obviously with Adams he spent so much time in the landscape that he was photographing, and that led to him creating the work that he did. And yes, by no means do I think that I'm going to create anything as profound or pioneering or anything close to the photos that Adams made, but I do think there is a lot to be said for that process. So that's going to tie into a little bit about what we're going to talk about today with tripods. But yeah, I just thought I'd briefly tell you where we are. Hopefully the weather plays ball. It's very changeable at the moment. The clouds are rolling in, the light is coming and going, but let's persevere. That's what landscape photography is all about after all. And if we don't get any photos tonight, then that's also kind of what landscape photography is all about. So one scenario where I'm always really grateful to have a tripod is whenever I want to do something called focus stacking, which is where you take two images of the same scene at different focus points, normally to combat issues with depth of field. So like this scene of this limestone pavement, I'm shooting it on my 20mm Sony f1.8 lens, quite a wide angle field of view on full frame, and I want to get my camera pretty close to the pavement because that's the main subject, I suppose. That's the thing that I want to get in focus and quite sharp. But I also want to get the background in sharp focus because we have some really nice ferns growing, we've got some trees and the rolling hills, and I want that sharpness front to back. And the only way to achieve that is to take two photos at different focus points. But the camera can't move between those two exposures because that means stitching the two images together to create a single file would just be too difficult. You'd have alignment issues. So really you need to make sure that your camera doesn't move, and therefore a tripod is the only way to really accurately achieve that. Yes, there are cameras now that can do focus stacking in body, but also shutter speed is something that you'll need to consider, because if you don't have much available light, you might need to be shooting your scenes at very, very slow shutter speeds, which might mean that you can't handhold it and get that sharpness. So focus stacking, if you ever do landscape photography and you want to experiment with those really nice foreground images, then definitely a tripod is going to be essential. If not, it will just make your life easier. So we'll cut back to me in the office to explain this next tip, because there's no subject here that enables me to kind of effectively demonstrate the point that I hope to make. So I'll be back with you in a second. So welcome back to the office, where I'm going to put some images up on screen from my archives to demonstrate this next use case for a tripod, and again one that I tend to use all the time, and that's when you want to be a little bit creative with your images. So a good example of this is anything to do with slow shutter speeds. There are plenty of examples where you'll need to use a slow shutter speed. Things like, of course, trying to get the right exposure value to expose your scene correctly. If there's low light, not enough available light, then you will need a slower shutter speed to kind of mitigate the need to increase your ISO, which will decrease your dynamic range and potentially reduce your image quality. But there are certain subjects where you'll also want to have a slow shutter speed to create a creative effect. Moving water is a great example of this. It's something that I love in landscape photography, and I did a video about it on this channel in the last couple of months, which I will link down in the description below, which gives you some tips on how to shoot moving water. But in that video, I talked about shutter speed because that plays a big role in creating that effect of capturing the motion of water to create that great silky image. Now for those types of shots, you're going to be wanting to shoot anything from maybe 1/20th of a second down to maybe a quarter, a half, or even 1 second or more, depending on the scene. And you can't do that handheld. And again, some may argue that modern cameras have such good stabilization that you can shoot comfortably at around half a second and get sharp images. But I wouldn't necessarily recommend that because of this next point. So I think one of the most valuable reasons to use a tripod, and why I continue to use a tripod, especially in my landscape photography, is because of what it affords you. It affords you the opportunity to just slow down. I think if we want to become better photographers and we want to create images that we're happy with, I think one of the root causes of that feeling is by being able to take our time to refine our compositions and to be patient and wait for the right opportunities. Whilst it's great to be agile, and great photos can come from being very quick to react to certain situations, there is a lot to be said for just slowing down and being a bit more meticulous. And that's what a tripod enables you to do. You can certainly spend time finding your composition, making these very, very minute adjustments to your scene to make sure that things are placed where they need to. And that's not something that you can easily do handheld. Yes, you can, of course, move the camera with your hands, but what if that moment isn't the right moment to take that shot? What if the light isn't how you want it? What if the conditions aren't right? What if you need to wait half an hour for the sunset, for example? Are you confident you're going to be able to get in that exact same position again to kind of create that image? I think there's too much room for failure in that approach. Whereas if you arrive at your location early, you can set up your tripod, and yes, absolutely use your hands. That's a great tip for this use case for a tripod, is to actually go handheld to find your composition and sort of find roughly where you want to place your camera. But once you've found that specific frame, you can then set up your tripod around that and place your camera exactly where you need to. And then you can, spend half an hour just relaxing, enjoying the environment, taking in that location, knowing that your scene and your composition and your photo is pretty much set up and good to go. That means that when the light comes, or when the conditions change, when that opportune moment arises, all you need to do is fire the shutter, because you know the composition is already locked in. And I think that's probably why a lot of landscape photographers will use tripods, even if the conditions or the light levels don't necessarily require them to use a tripod. They can easily achieve a perfect exposure triangle between aperture, shutter speed and ISO, where they could easily shoot the scene handheld, but they often choose to have that tripod in place even in the middle of the day because it affords them that ability to just slow down and refine. And that refinement is what is going to create better images in the long run. So apologies I wasn't able to finish this video out in the field, but the light never materialized, the clouds rolled in, and there were no real photos to be had on this occasion, but it was at least a true reflection of what landscape photography is often like for most people. So I don't like to shy away from posting videos like this because I do try to keep it real as much as possible. I'm not always going to get good photos, but hopefully you've at least gotten some tips out of this video, and the examples that I've shared are going to give you some things to think about. And if you're on the fence about whether to invest in a tripod or whether you should take your tripod out more often, hopefully this gives you a few more things to consider. So it is always really demoralizing when I can't share photos from the location in these films, but I hope that's not too much of a problem. I hope you enjoyed the video regardless, and hopefully better photos will come. But hey, that has been the kind of ethos the last few weeks, hasn't it? It's just trust the process, patience, perseverance, and good photos will come. So, as always, thank you so much for watching. If you haven't already, do consider hitting that subscribe button. If you enjoy this type of content and you want to see more photography content, then I post new videos every Wednesday. And if you enjoyed this one, make sure, again, to just give it a thumbs up. Thanks so much for the support, guys. Enjoy the rest of your week, and I will see you on Wednesday.